On to Scott McTominay then. He is a man who has been strongly linked with a loan move in January, and over recent weeks been linked with a permanent move this summer. Contracted to June 2025. Only 26. Scored 2 for Scotland earlier on the international break. Only played 508 minutes in the Premier League this season for Manchester United. He's at the age really where he needs to be playing week in, week out. Interesting one. When the story broke in January, and then again recently, there's been a massive debate on social media, probably more weighted to not being happy with the rumour to McTominay. I'm just going to go out and say it. Look, if it's good enough for Eddie Howe, it's good enough for me. Good enough for you?
Yeah, I'm expecting a barrage of comments here on the Facebook and the YouTube that aren't happy with us. And then look, they're already coming in now. Please no McTominay not. For me, I'll be quite happy with Scott McTominay, and I know that is gonna, because you say it like create a debate. It didn't really create a debate. I think the rumors of it's very one-sided. James Madison's very one-sided that everybody thinks it's a good deal. I'm really surprised at how many people are against signing Scott McTominay.
Do you know what? He's not a sexy name. He's not a sexy player.
Yeah,
but he'll just do the job, which will allow Bruno, Joelinton, Isaac to flourish. In many ways, he's kind of like a Toyota player, someone who's just going to break the play up. He's going to not grab the headlines, but he's going to do the dirty work, which allows the flashy headline grabber players to run wild.
Look, Jose Mourinho brought him through at Manchester United. He was an absolute regular week in, week out under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Yes, he struggled a bit for game time under Erik ten Hag, but that's probably because Casemiro's joined. He plays he plays every single game for Scotland. He's a leader. He's only 26. There's a lot to like about this type of deal, and I think it probably wouldn't break the bank either, which is obviously a bonus.
Jordy says McTominay, no, which is quite a few of the comments along that similar thought. Truel says, first, McTominay is a red devil. He will cost way more than he is worth, and Man United would not sell to Newcastle United in their opinion. It's getting worse to kind of face his expensive cover. I'm not convinced he would swap bench for bench anyway. I guess the big question is, and they're not, like for like players, but you would think if McTominay arrived, at least for the start of next season, you would probably see Joelinton and Bruno keep their place, and then it would be McTominay in for Sean Longstaff. Is he better than Sean Longstaff?
Yes. And I know I'm going to get pelters for it, but I think he is. I think on his day, you'd have McTominay over him. He adds goals from midfield. I really do like him. I really do. And I know Newcastle fans are just dead against it, but I think you could do a lot worse. I think there's a very good point being made there in the comments that Manchester United, as I've already mentioned, might not be willing to do business with him. But I think if he's open to the move and Man United are looking to sell him, Newcastle could do a lot worse than going out and forking out for him.
Because it is the sort of style that he plays. That's kind of what Newcastle United have missed this season, isn't it? Where you haven't really got a player of his style who can really cover the back four. Sean Longstaff's tried. Bruno does a job to a degree. Joelinton, well, he's just a tank, but that's not what he's on the pitch for. Whereas McTominay can sit and he can just help protect the back line.
Yeah, he can. He's very, very good at holding in that number 6 role. He's got bags of energy, decent passer. As I mentioned, he does like to go from midfield. We saw him obviously score twice the other night. For Scotland, he scored, plenty for Manchester United. I think you could do a lot worse. And I think, yes, someone's putting it's expensive cover, but even if he does come in and sit on the bench, very, very good option.
But I think if he came in, I don't think he'd be first team. First, he would be cover. I think he'd come in and he'd be a starter. Truel says, why buy Man United rejects? I don't get that, to be honest. And I want to address this point to a wider degree because I think, and I don't mean any disrespect to Truel, and this isn't aimed at you, this is aimed at kind of a portion of fans in general, not just Newcastle fans, but I think across the board. Sometimes there can be a bit of snobbery, I think, when it comes to names being linked. For instance, when I mentioned Philip Billing the other day, Why would we buy someone that goes down and gets relegated? Why would we buy a Man United reject? Just because it hasn't worked out for them at these teams, it doesn't mean they're bad players. It doesn't mean they can go on to achieve absolutely fantastic things. And I think sometimes you just got to take a step back and say, right, okay, he's only played 500 minutes of football this season. Does that mean he's a bad player? Or does that mean they've got someone like Casemiro who is a level above, and that's why he can't get into the side?
And also, speaking of signing teams as rejects, do you think Arsenal were saying the same thing about Zinchenko and Gabby Jesus? I bet they were. Oh, why are we signing Manchester City's B team? They're going to go on and win the league. And look, that's not me saying that Scott McTominay's going to win Newcastle United the league. But if we're signing a player who's played close to 100 games for Manchester United, I don't think that's a bad thing in my opinion.
No, not at all. Derek says, I agree. McTominay is better than Sean Longstaff marginally. We should be looking for something better. Jody says, not going to lie, if we brought McTominay in, I'd be disappointed. It's interesting, isn't it? In many ways, Aaron, do you think Newcastle are maybe victims of their own success? Because obviously the project has jumped forward, hasn't it, a couple of seasons? Newcastle finished, let's say, even just in the Conference League, it's still well ahead of where they expected to be. Does that then cloud people's judgment in terms of the transfer targets? If Newcastle, for instance, would just finish 9th or 10th, McTominay might be better received than if they're going to finish 4th and they sign McTominay.
Absolutely. I think if you rewind a year when Newcastle were finishing 10th and Scott McTominay was playing week in, week out for Ralph Rangnick at Manchester United, I think a lot of people would have taken that deal. I think now, should Newcastle finish in the top 4, or some fans can be thinking, right, well, you've got to go and sign, top 4 players. I think they need depth more than anything. They need cover. They need a bigger squad, players that have been there, done it, and McTominay ticks all those boxes.
Graham Morton says, McTominay has an aggressive characteristics that would have missed at times this season. Sometimes you need to mix it up. Truel says, the question is, has McTominay played well in the last 2 seasons? I think yes. I just think Man United got the opportunity to sign Casemiro, who would walk into most teams on the face of the planet. And that's why he doesn't get picked. And Sam Milner, who, by the way, if we remember, wasn't a big fan of James Maddison. I don't know if that has changed. Sam there from Newcastle Fans TV. He says, Scott McTominay, the thinking man's Andy Fye. Terrible idea. I think that's extremely harsh on McTominay. And we'll give Milkshakey his where she says McTominay would be good. Just talk about Valovic. Do you want to do it? Do you want to? I mean, he's going to cost a bit of money, isn't he?
I mean, I think the last person we're going to talk about currently, a striker in Italy, not Vlahovic, but going to cost a lot of money. I know Juventus have got their issues with their finances, and they might have to have a fire sale. If we think that James Maddison is going to have suitors this summer, I think Vlahovic is going to have a lot more, including the likes of City, United, maybe Newcastle, but it would be a hell of a lot of money to get him from Juventus.
McTominay then out of 10. Can we see him arriving in the summer? I'll jump in straight away, right? I can. I think he is towards the top of the list of what Eddie Howe and the scouting staff want. I know we can clearly see it's not going to be a popular move in the first instance. But again, I go back to the first point I made about McTominay. If it's good enough for Eddie Howe, good enough for Steve Nixon, good enough for Dan Ashworth, then of course Newcastle fans will back it. This, I think, has got legs. They've clearly watched him. They clearly like him. He's going to want to get somewhere with first team football. The big question is whether Man United will sell. But yeah, I'm going to go like a 8.5 here.
I'll go 7. I think that it's obvious they like him. They were very keen on him in January when they were looking for a midfielder. Big ask to see Man United selling him, depending on who they buy this summer. I'll go 7.